Hey everyone, welcome to All Techies. I'm Pankaj Rai, and in this video I'm going to talk about coroutines. In my previous tutorials on coroutines, I've talked about how you could add coroutine to your Android application. What are the different coroutine builders that we have, like launch, async, launch when started, launch when resumed, launch when created, and in this tutorial I'm going to talk about launch and async. So let me start with launch first. So we have lifecycle scope, and on that scope I'm calling launch. That means here it's on main thread. So if we want to switch to the background thread, then what we should do is like we can pass dispatcher here. That's one of the way to switch to main thread to background thread. And another one is like, say you might be doing some sort of calculation here, and then you want to set something on the main thread, and again you may be doing some sort of calculations. Then this is the place where it will raise an exception if you try to set anything on the view, because view should get updated from the main thread only. So what you can do here is like you could use another suspending function called as with context, and this will allow you to switch between the context. Now you could set the view, because this is getting executed in the main thread, so set anything on the text view, button, change background, anything you can do it here. So everything is running on background, and out of that only this part is switching the context from background to foreground. Also, the second case is about handling an exception. Say that I have a calculation as intentionally I'm doing like divide by 0. Now this should raise an exception. Because I'm doing divide by 0, so it has to raise an exception. So how can we handle the exception? One of the common mistake which most of the guys does when they try to start with coroutine is that they try to put this into try catch. And the moment they try to do this, then one thing is very straightforward, that they are not going to save the application to crash. That will make app to crash. But why is that? It's already been surrounded by try and catch, so what's the point for making app to crash? So that's all because if any exception is raised inside launch, that is treated as a system level exception. And because this launch inside this as a system level crash is already been reported, so that's why that makes your app also to crash. However, if you do reverse of this, rather than putting entire coroutine builder in try catch, if you take try catch inside this, then as it raises the system level crash, it understands that it is in the context for the try and catch, and it will catch the exception. So here app will not crash. So it is one of the way to catch the exception. However, we have an efficient way also, where you could use coroutine exception handler. And then you can pass this here. Launch takes the context which we have given as dispatcher.io. Start, I'll come on this. And also you can specify this exception handler. So let me do one thing. Let me pass this exception handler. So now what will happen is, like, in case of any exception, I do not need to put this in try catch, and as it's going to raise an exception, so it will come and execute this block. Now let me talk about async. How about async? So async is useful if you want to get the result. Like for launch, if you want to get the result from it, then it's just going to return you the job, which you can use to cancel this coroutine at later point of time. However, if you want to get the value out of it, then you should use async. Through async, you can get the result. So this returns deferred. And deferred is nothing but it's a guaranteed way of saying that in future this is going to give you the result. And now to get the result, what you need to call is just await. And this is going to give you the result. Now the one thing is that you are seeing this error, that's all because await is a suspending function. And suspending function should get called from another suspending function or from another coroutine builder, but not outside like this on create. But how about if exception is raised here also? Well, even if you pass something like coroutine handler, that's not going to work because async doesn't throw system level exception. So say I have lifecycle scope dot launch, and inside this I'm saying defer dot await. Now this line is going to raise an exception if any exception is raised here, like divide by 0. So even though if this gets executed, it's not going to raise exception, rather it's going to keep the exception, and that will throw as soon as you try to read the value. And to solve it, if you are using launch, now you could add the coroutine exception handler, or if you're not using launch or async, you're using another suspending function, then you can put this inside the try catch block. So by this way, you can handle the exception. So this is one of the way to handle exception thrown by async. Another thing is, like, how about if you do not want to execute async as soon as the control comes to this point? Say that you might be having multiple async, deferred 1, deferred 2, and so by default what happens is that as soon as it comes to on create, this gets executed, and when control comes here, this gets executed, and finally you need to await for the result. So when you are waiting for the result, at that time you will get these values. But how about if you do not want to run this part as soon as control comes to this point? So for that, you can give start parameter. So coroutine.lazy. Coroutine start.lazy means that until and unless you call start or await, this part will not execute. The execution of async block will only begins when you either call start or you call await. So by this way, even though control is coming to this point, the block will not execute. And this is useful in those scenarios where you do not want to run the block as soon as the control comes to that point. Now the major difference between both of them. One difference I said it, one returns deferred, another one returns job. Async returns deferred and the launch returns job. What's another difference? Another difference is asynchronous programming. As the name itself suggests, this is for the asynchronous programming. Launch runs everything in a sequential manner. If you want to run it in asynchronous fashion, then you should use async. So by this way, your execution time will come down because you can execute multiple things simultaneously using asynchronous, and by this way you're going to save time and you'll see the results much faster than using launch. But if the objective is to run in a sequential fashion, then you should use launch. So that's it in this video. I hope this might be helpful for you to understand about when to use launch, when to use async, how to handle exceptions for launch or async, and how you can start lazily the async block. Also, how to get result from async. And that's it in this video. If you have liked this video, then hit the like button and do not forget to subscribe this channel so that you'll not miss notification for the upcoming videos. Thank you so much and stay tuned for the upcoming video.